Welcome to the Coaching Bootcamp. This session is broadly under the umbrella of supporting and guiding learners in clubs, and we are specifically working with the score data that comes from the 4 operations assessments. This is part 1 of 2, and in this session we are developing growth pillar number 2, which is about facilitation of learning skills. So in this bootcamp session, we will dig deeper into the 4 operations assessment that the children write in all of the TIMCA clubs. We will explore how the assessment is structured to give us information that we can use for learning and helping and guiding children in their learning. We will explore how the data is entered into a digital format. Then we will look at what the scores from the assessment can actually tell us from a learning point of view. In other sessions about this assessment, we will use the data in different ways. But for now, we are focusing on the scores. If you want to follow along in your notes, we're going to start working on page 1 of 4. And I want to introduce a term here, the term diagnostic tools or diagnostic assessment. So finding a child's learning path is not always easy. So you might have a number of children in your club, and trying to establish what they can and cannot do mathematically can be quite tricky. But the assessment that we do with the children at the beginning of the school year for the TIMCA clubs can actually help us identify what the children can and cannot do. And this is what I want to share with you today. So a diagnostic assessment or a diagnostic tool examines the knowledge and skills that a child already has. And the results and the workings from this type of assessment can help you plan where the children need to go next. So the assessments are structured in a way that assume that the child is going to follow a particular learning path. And that is what we're going to dig deeper into in this session. So if we use the assessments that we do in the clubs as diagnostic tools, in other words, we can make a diagnosis from the information that we have, almost like doctors, we can find out what is the next step on each child's learning path. And there's 2 ways that we can do this with the scores that come out of the assessment. So the first one is at a very broad, high level based on their scores. And the second one is at a detailed level based on the strategies that they use to answer the questions in the assessment. For now, as I've said before, we are focusing just on looking at the scores and what information that can tell us about the child, their knowledge, and where they need to move to next. Okay, so before we dig deeper into the actual data that we can get out of the assessment, we need to understand the structure, because the structure of the assessment assumes, like I said, that the child will follow a particular learning path, and we can look at each question and see where they are along that learning path. So the assessment has 4 sections, 1 for each of the main operations. So there's an addition section, subtraction, multiplication, and division sections. Each section has got 5 questions, so that gives us a total score of 20 for the whole assessment. And each question in each section gets progressively more difficult from the child's point of view. Also, the numbers in the questions are carefully selected to encourage children to use strategies to answer. That is something that we're going to explore in more detail in another session. But for now, I need you to know that the numbers are not randomly chosen. They are specially selected to encourage certain things. So let's look at unpacking the addition questions. So question 1.1 is 3 plus 4. And the answer to this works within the 10. So 3 plus 4 is 7. It doesn't go beyond the structure of the 10. It's numbers below 10. So this is grade 1 type of work. Question 1.2, 8 plus 6. Now all of a sudden we're jumping over the initial 10. We're still working less than 20, and this is something where we're now doing a sum or a problem that bridges through the 10. Okay? This is also grade 1. Question 3 is 23 plus 18. So now we're working with 2 digits that we're adding. We're still working with an answer that's under 50. Okay. This has now gone up to grade 2 level. Question 4, 55 plus 67. The answer may come up into 3 digits. It might not. But we're now still working with 2-digit numbers that will give us a bigger answer. This is possibly a grade 3 level. And then the final one for addition is 104 plus 97, adding 3 digits. Sorry, there's a mistake, a mistake there. Adding 3 digits and 2 digits. This is now also grade 3 level. The important thing to note is that the assessment for this section doesn't go any further than grade 3. So this is a grade 3 question. It doesn't go up to grade 4 or beyond that. There are, like I said, reasons why these numbers have been chosen. Okay, and this is something that we'll explore in another session. Let's look at the subtraction questions. So again, question 1 for subtraction, 8 minus 2, we're working within the structure of that initial 10. So that's a grade 1 level. Second question, 12 minus 5, we're now working still with less than 20, but again we're bridging over the 10. So we're going 12 and we're going backwards 5 places, and that is still grade 1. The third question, 23 minus 18, again, we're working now beyond 20, but we're still under 50, but we've now gone up into 2 digits. And this is grade 2 level. Fourth question, 467 minus 43 is a 3-digit and a 2-digit sum. This is now taking us also into grade 3. And then the final one, 305 minus 97, is also a 3-digit and 2-digit problem, and again that's grade 3. And as the same as addition, the subtraction section only assesses up to grade 3 level. Okay, and again these numbers have been chosen specifically to elicit strategies, but we're not digging into those strategies just at the moment. Multiplication. First one, 2 times 4. The answer to that is going to give us underneath the 10, within the 10. That's grade 1 level. Second question, 5 times 3. We're now getting beyond that first 10. We're bridging over the 10. We're still in grade 1 level. Question 3, 12 times 4. We are working now beyond the 20, beyond the 10, possibly still under 50, and we're now introducing 2-digit multiplication. Grade 2 level. 24 times 6. The answer may come up into 3 digits, but again we're working with a 2-digit multiplied by a single digit. This spreads over into grade 3 and grade 4. And then the final one, 120 times 15, we're working with 3 digits, potentially with a 4-digit answer, and this is grade 4 level. So we can see that the multiplication section for this assessment goes up to grade 4. So it tells us something about the child's level of multiplication well into grade 4. And the division, similarly, 6 divided by 3, we're working within that first 10 again, grade 1. 18 divided by 2, we're now working into the 20s, but we're bridging over the 10 all the time. This is grade 1 again. 24 divided by 3, we're still working now. We're working with numbers over 20, under 50, but we're now working with potentially 2 digits, as we saw there, 2 digits. This is grade 2. 75 divided by 3, we're now working beyond 50. This is grade 3 or 4 level. And then the final one, 120 divided by 15, we're doing division with a 3-digit number, and we're now into grade 4 level. And similarly, the division section assesses up to grade 4. Okay, so that is the structure of the questions in the assessment. There's 5 for each operation, and you've seen how those questions roughly move from grade 1 up to grade 2, grade 3, and possibly grade 4 for multiplication and division. Okay, so the children in the club at the beginning of the school year, they write the assessment, and they write that on paper, and then that is given back to project staff, and what happens to it? Let's find out. So first of all, the data from the written assessment is entered into a spreadsheet in a very, very simple format. A 1 is entered for a correct answer, 0 for an incorrect answer, and an X for an unanswered question. So in other words, the child hasn't shown any workings, and there's no answer for that particular question. The second thing is that once the data is in, then the spreadsheet has been set up to calculate percentages for each operation. So there's a percentage for addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, and there's an overall score for the test out of 20. Then some high-level summaries are generated based on some very basic logic that's related to the questions that the child has answered and the grade level of those questions. So we're going to see how this all looks now. So we've already seen that each question in the assessment has got a grade level. Okay, so these are put into the spreadsheet. So here we've got the addition questions. Question 1, 3 plus 4. Question 2, 8 plus 6, 23 plus 18, 55 plus 67, 104 plus 97. Here's the grade level for each of those. So for example, 104 plus 97 is a grade 3 level question. Here's the subtraction ones, 8 minus 2, etc., etc. So 23 minus 18 is a grade 2 level question. So this relates to the stuff that we've just looked at. But it's also captured in the spreadsheet because you'll see how it helps us to work some basic things out. So for multiplication, here are the multiplication questions and the grades. So 24 times 6 is a grade 3 level question. Division, here are the questions with their answers, their grades. And so, for example, 120 divided by 15 is a grade 4 question. So those are headings in the spreadsheet. So if you want to continue following along in your notes, let's move on to page 2. So what does the data look like once it's entered into the spreadsheet? So let's have a look at addition and subtraction. Remember that a 1 is entered for a correct answer and a 0 is for an incorrect answer. So if we're looking, this is the child's name, A, B, C, etc. This is addition. This is subtraction. So child A, 1, 1, 1, 0, 0. So that means they got that one right, that one right, that one right, that one's wrong, that one's wrong. Okay. For subtraction, this one's right, this one's right, this one's right, and then the last two are wrong because there's a 0 there. So for addition, this child A has got 60%. That's 3 out of 5. Okay, so that's 60% of the possible 100 for addition. And they've also got 60% for subtraction. Let's look at another child here. So for subtraction, this child's got the first question right, doesn't get the second one right, the third one is correct, and the fourth and fifth are incorrect. So they've basically answered 2 out of the 5. So that is 40% for that child. And then if we look at child J over here for addition, a 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. So they've got all 5 of those questions correct. That means they've got 100% for their addition section. Okay, so let's look at multiplication and division. It works exactly the same way. A 1 for a correct answer, a 0 for an incorrect answer. So let's have a look here. Child C has got the first question for multiplication correct, and then none of the others. So 0, 0, 0, 0. So they've basically got 1 out of 5, 20% for multiplication. Let's look at this child J for division. The first and the second questions are correct, and then the third, fourth, and fifth are incorrect. So 2 out of the 5, a 40% score for division. Okay, and let's just pause here. So let's have a look at some more data and just see if we can work out what kind of story it tells us at this point. So we're going to look at child G and child I, and I want you to look at the score for subtraction. I want you to actually look at the headings above for the subtraction questions, and I want you to see which answers have been which questions have been answered correctly. So here's some data, okay? And we're looking first at child G, so it's this line here. Okay, so I want you to look at the subtraction score, 60. I want you to look at the headings and which ones are correct answers. So the correct answers are question 1, question 2, question 4. So they've got 3 out of the 5 correct. Okay. So what does that tell us about this child? Interesting, isn't it? So perhaps they got grade 1 questions correct. The grade 2 question they didn't get right. But the grade 3 question they got right. I wonder why. Is it to do with the numbers and the strategies that are being used here? The grade 3 question, the harder grade 3 question for subtraction, they didn't get right. Okay, so it's an interesting one because there's no progression from grade 1 all the way up. There's a space in the middle here for this grade 2 that wasn't correct. Let's look at child I. So here, this line. So I want you to just look at the score, 60%. So the same score as child G, so they've both got 60%. Okay, and in fact the pattern is exactly the same. Grade 1 question correct, grade 1 question correct, grade 2 question not. Grade 3, the first one correct, the grade 3 one, the last one not so. Okay, so what does this tell us about these two children? Have a think about that. I'm not going to give you an answer at this particular point. Let's look at some multiplication. Same thing. We're going to look at child H and I. So again, I want you to look at the score that the child has got, the headings in the spreadsheet, and the answers that have been correctly given. So child H, again, this top line here. Okay, we're looking at multiplication. So the score for multiplication is 60. So they've got 3 out of the 5 correct. The headings, let's have a look. So they've got the grade 1 multiplication correct, the first question. The second grade 1 correct. The grade 2 not correct. The first grade 3 one not correct. But they have got the grade 4 one correct. That's very interesting, isn't it? Okay, so this one with the 3 digits, they have got this answer correct, but they haven't got the grade 2 and 3s in between. So what does that tell us about this child? We would probably have to go back and look at their written work to see how they've answered this final question. Okay. For the moment, we're not worried about that because we're just looking at the scores, but that is the thing that we are going to look at in another session. Let's look at child I. So underneath here, slightly different pattern. Also 60% again, so 3 questions answered correctly for multiplication. The grade 1s, both of the grade 1 questions. The grade 2 question hasn't been answered, but the grade 3 question, the first one has. And the grade 4 question, the harder one, hasn't. Okay, so it's a slightly different story to child H, who has answered this harder grade 4 question correctly. Whereas this child has answered the grade 1 questions and has accessed the grade 3 one, but not grade 2 and not grade 4. Okay, interesting stories. I'll let you think about that for a moment. Okay, so this assessment is written at least twice a year by the children in the clubs. So first of all, at the beginning of the year, as close to the beginning of the year as possible, and then again later in the year just before the clubs finish. Okay, so at least twice a year. So why do we need to have the assessment twice? So if we have 2 sets of data, we can compare the scores between the 2 and see if the children have moved forwards and backwards in between. Okay, so for example, if a child gets an overall score of 60% in the first assessment, and then an overall score of 80 in the second, that child has made some progress somewhere. Okay, so they've moved up 20 percentage points between the beginning of the year and the end of the year. So we could then look at the scores for each operation and see exactly where that progress has been made by that child. So we would then dig deeper into, is it in addition, is it in subtraction, multiplication, division, or is it a bit more messy than that, because it can actually be messy. But this is the reason why we have scores. This is the reason why we unpack the information at an operation level for each operation, for addition, etc., so that we can make a high-level comparison from the overall score, but then we can go down and dig deeper and see what has happened in each operation. Okay, so now let's move on to a more high-level overview. So we've been looking at scores and we've been looking at, the entries, the correct answers, etc., for each operation. Let's transform this a bit now. So what happens next is that in the spreadsheet, each percentage score is then repeated again in another area of the spreadsheet, and the overall score for the assessment. So if we look at these children here, A, B, and C, we can see the total. So child A has got an overall 35% score for the assessment. Child B is also 35%. Child C has got a 40%. And then next to it, we've got the addition, the subtraction, the multiplication, and the division. So child A, 60% for addition, 60% for subtraction, 0 for multiplication, 20 for division. Child B, overall 35, 60% for addition, 40 for subtraction, 40 for multiplication, 0 for division. Child C, an overall of 40, 60 for addition, 40 for subtraction, 20 for multiplication, 40 for division. So even at this level, we can see that even though the child has got quite low scores, these children have got low scores, because this is out of 20, this means they've got like, I don't know, 2 or 3 out of 20. We can even see here, like child A hasn't got any of the multiplication ones right. Child B hasn't got any of the division ones right. So even at this level, this information is quite useful. If we look at 2 children who have got higher scores, J, who's got 60, everything right for addition, 40, 60, 40. Child K, 80% overall, 100% for addition, 80% for subtraction, 40% for multiplication, 100% for division. So this child K, is 80% overall. Their addition is all correct. Their division is all correct. Their weakest point is multiplication, which is very interesting. Okay? So there's just some highlighted information of a couple that we've already spoken about. So now what we do is we take, here's the scores that we were just looking at. Yeah. Now we get a very high level report, if you like, a bit of text that tells us about the child. So we've got the figures, we've got the scores that we can talk about, but there's also a sort of a summary here. Okay, so if we look, there's an addition focus, a subtraction focus, multiplication, division focus. So if we look at child B, we can see they've only got 35% overall, and that the division is 0. Yeah. So let's see what this tells us. Based on the different grade levels of each question for each operation, this here tells us that this child, addition, they can do up to grade 2 level. So they've obviously answered grade 1 and grade 2 level questions correctly, but not the others. And, they've got 60%, so that's kind of like, that's 3 out of the 5. Yeah, so those are going to be the grade 1, grade 2 levels. Their subtraction is only at grade 1 level, so they haven't been able to answer any of the other level questions. Their multiplication is also at grade 1 level. Okay, nothing higher. And their division is weak. It's below grade 1. So they don't have any division because they've got no questions correct, so it's below grade 1 level. Okay, so we've got the child, we've got their overall score, we've got their scores for each operation, and then this tells us roughly, based on the combination of the questions they've answered, where they're at. Okay, so if we look at child K, this is the child who got 80% for the test, 100% for addition, 100% for division, and then stuff in between. So their addition is at grade 3 level. That's the highest level that this test assesses. Yeah, so that their addition is at grade 3 level. Their division is at grade 4 because that's the highest level that is assessed here, and they've got 100% for both of those. So they're okay on those two. Their subtraction, in fact, based on the questions that they've answered, is at grade 3 level, which is also okay. Their multiplication is their weak point. Okay, they are only at grade level 1 for their multiplication. So with 40%, that means they've only got 2 out of the 5. Okay, and the 2 out of the 5 that they've answered are going to be the 2 that are at grade 1 level. All right, so this is a summary report, if you like, that tells us who the child is, what their scores are, a summary version, and then a sort of a text-based report that gives us in words where we can focus. So we know for child B that we need to kind of do work at all levels because they're quite weak anyway. They're 35% overall. Yeah. So everything needs work. Yeah. So, if this child was a grade 4 child, this would be problematic because they are at grade 2, grade 1, grade 1, grade 1 level. Okay. For child K, if it was a grade 4, their addition's okay, their subtraction's okay, their division's great, they need work on their multiplication. Okay, so these statements here are not an exact science, but they're a high-level guide to how the child has answered and the combination of questions that they have got right, okay? Because we saw when we looked at the data that a child might answer the first one correct and the last one correct, and then everything else in the middle is not right. So how on earth do they do the question 5 and the question 1? Okay, so using that sort of combination, these textual statements here give us a high-level idea of where that child needs to go next. Okay, so now we have a very important question to answer. We have some information. The spreadsheet has given us information which has been captured from the children's written answers. So with the information that we have, where do we go with each of these children next? So that's the question. So let's step back a bit and say, okay, so if we gave this information to the coaches in Harry Smith or elsewhere, we can create a PDF for each school and each grade, which will give them that high-level summary, okay, so that they can see at a glance where they need to focus their attention for each child. And in time, once we know how to look at the workings that the children have produced, we can support this high-level information with more detailed information later. So this is a sample report that we could give to the coaches. Now, what it doesn't give them is any of the scores. Okay, it just says, child, here's your child, and this is where you should be focusing. Okay, so from this assessment, child A, their additions at grade 2, their subtractions at grade 2, their multiplication is very weak or below grade 1, their division is weak. So depending on what club this is for, let's say it's a grade 4 club, that child needs a lot of work. Okay? That child needs to have focus across all of the operations. So let's look at child L, and let's say again this is a grade 4 club. Their addition is at the highest level for this assessment. They've got some level of grade 3 subtraction. Their multiplication's good, their division's good. So what would we do with that child? We would focus on their subtraction work. Okay? Where would we go with these children next? So for each child, we could tell a story about what needs to happen next. Okay, and so that is the end of the video content for this bootcamp session. There is homework and there's a further activity to do, which will be posted separately.